Good evening. Uh, I'm Jadrian Steele. I'm the Vice President of Development here at the New York Public Library. It's my pleasure to welcome you this evening to the Stavros Niarchos Foundation Library for tonight's program. This winter, we were honored to install Requiem by multidisciplinary artist Alexandra Polzin, and we're very excited to be here tonight to celebrate its inauguration here at the library. I'd like to give special thanks to David Gill, the German ambassador to Ireland and the former consul general of the Federal Republic of Germany to New York, and his wife Sheila for their leadership in organizing support of this incredible work. And I would also like to thank all of the donors who made this installation possible. We're so grateful for their generosity in securing the sculpture's safe transport and display. Requiem has been and will continue to be a source of inspiration to all who visit this library. Here this evening to speak more about his vision for the piece, as well as arts and culture more broadly in today's society, is the artist himself, Alexandra Polzin. Polzin is a sculptor, painter, and stage designer who was born in Berlin in 1973. His works are installed in public spaces around the world, in galleries and museums, including the Getty Center in Los Angeles. Examples of his work include a monument to Giordano Bruno, commissioned by George Soros, that was installed at the Postdamer Platz in Berlin, and his sculpture Homage to Paul Celan was placed in the Anne Frank Garden in Paris. Most recently, the Royal Academy in London installed Polzin's J.S. Bach sculpture in their foyer. Again and again, his works are created in dialogue with literature, music, and philosophy. Part of this exchange are his stage designs for opera productions in Salzburg, New York, Madrid, Brussels, and Geneva. Joining Alexander in conversation tonight is the library's Associate Director of the Miriam and Ira D. Wallach Division of Art's Prints and Photographs, Clare Bell. Previously, Clare has held a number of distinguished positions, including Senior Director of Exhibitions at the Guggenheim Museum in New York, where she supervised numerous international and domestic traveling shows, as well as Chief Curator and Deputy Director at the Museum of the City of New York. Clare has written extensively on the work of Roy Lichtenstein and served as manager of exhibitions for the foundation established in his name. She has taught at the School of Visual Arts and more recently at NYU in the Graduate Museum Studies program. We're looking forward to tonight's conversation, but first, a special treat. The Gospel Praise team from LaGuardia High School is joining us for an exclusive performance. The Gospel Praise team is a spirited and soulful student ensemble that brings the rich legacy of gospel music to life through powerful performances and passionate study. With a repertoire that spans traditional spirituals, stirring anthems, and contemporary gospel hits, the group uplifts audiences and celebrates the deep cultural and historic roots of the genre. Open to all students from all majors, the ensemble welcomes anyone with a love of music and a desire to move hearts and inspire through song. With that, I turn things over to the LaGuardia Praise team.
Oh Lord my God, how I in awesome wonder consider all the world thy hand hath made. I see the stars, I hear the rolling thunder, thy power throughout the universe displayed. Then sings my soul, my Savior God God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sing my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, 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 how great thou art. I will bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me. Bless His holy, holy, holy name. For He has done great things. He has done great things. He has done great things. Bless His holy name. For He has done great things. He has done great things. He has done great things. Bless His holy, 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 holy name.
Hello, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here to have this opportunity to draw out of Alexander something about his practice, his art, and then we'll get to a very, I hope, robust conversation about Requiem downstairs. But what I thought I would, I hope...
It's probably after hearing this group, I could say everything is already said. We had the three important ingredients. We had youth, we had art, and we had spirituality.
Yes.
And that's it. There's not so much to add, but yeah, let's try.
Well, we'll springboard from there because obviously you're very moved by the art that surrounds you. in all of its facets. And so I'm eager to have, myself and the audience understand, growing up in East Berlin, what was your experience of art as a young artist?
First, this experience didn't start as a young artist. It starts as a tiny human being, and as a child, and then as a youngster, as a teenager, art was a survival technique. In East Germany, behind the wall, art were islands of freedom. Yeah, the society was constructed with a lot of censorship, and there was no truth in any kind of media, and when you opened a newspaper, it was full of lies. But surprisingly, that formed an artist practice where truth had a chance and a hidden presence. And that was for a growing up child, for a youngster who is curious about the world, it was an endless, wonderful field of discovery. It's very, the people in the GDR, they learned to listen with special ears and watch with special eyes in between the lines. When you visited a performance of Hamlet in the GDR, and Hamlet says something is rotten in the state of Denmark, the whole audience was very much aware he's talking about us. Mm-hmm. So, and that, that formed an important role, like daily food.
So did you feel that it was a risk to move in the direction of your own freedom of expression?
You learned very early on to handle the system and the risk. So every child that grew up in the GDR learned very clear that there are two different spheres. There's the sphere in school where you're not, by definition, you're not allowed to say what you mean and what you think. And you learn to play that. And you learned at home, most of the time, it's the sphere where you can discuss openly. And that also applied, as I mentioned, to the practice of art. So it was not fear, it was very attractive to think about, to be part of these islands mm-hmm. of freedom.
And you had a remarkable experience, you mentioned to me, that's really part of your biography, of having the opportunity to have met an artist yes. who allowed you to sort of, learn the craft.
Yeah, that was part of my lucky experience. I was a child who painted like every little child, maybe a little bit more. And then I had the luck that I met an old sculptor that stopped working but still had a studio, and he gave me the key to his studio, and after school I could play around in the studio and experiment with all kinds of tools and material, and sometimes he came by and taught me things that I need to know. Mm-hmm. So it was a very lucky start.
And that led you as...
And we're talking about I was 9 years old when that happened.
So that's right. That's extraordinary that someone would, give you free access and creative reign, but also teach you yes. at the same time. Oh, I'm so sorry. Of course. Yes. So with that creative reign, there are practicalities, and you ended up becoming a stonemason later in your 20s?
Yeah, that was the reason why I did that is a little bit different. After I finished school, which is in Germany, it's Abitur, so you are 17 when you finish that. I was already sure that I want to be an artist, but I was not sure that I can make a living out of that. Mm-hmm. And then I thought, okay, why not learning craft, which I can always rely on and make a living. And that was the reason why I had an education as a stonemason. Had nothing to do with my artistic practice, because the things that I learned as a stonemason has not so much to do with art. I can make your bathroom until today, so that's...
And you can handle some tough materials.
Yes, that's true.
Right?
Yes.
Because we see that in the work as well.
Yeah.
And was sculpture something that, we'll talk about sculpture as really sort of like kind of a basin of a lot of your practice. I know you paint still, but sculpture seems to be the way that you are sort of bringing in all of your ideas to.
Yes and no. It's a very comforting situation. I learned that in the studio over many years. One big rule in making art, maybe making anything, is you cannot force things, or you can only force things to a certain point. And when you overstep this point, then you make mistakes and break it. So in my practice, in my studio, it's a very privileged situation. When I get stuck in one area, so when I get stuck in working on a sculpture, I can easily switch to paintings and then continue with painting. And then all of a sudden, what was the imaginary border with a piece of sculpture vanish away, and I can continue.
I see.
And that was, that was a very lucky situation
And
all my life.
we should tell the audience that your studio is in Berlin.
Yes.
It's on the property. You told
Where
me
I grew up.
you
I'm a very rooted person. I built with my family a house that we live in, and the studio that I work in the garden where I basically grew up. And that is a garden that is 200 meters away from the former wall. So the cut through Germany and the presence of history was very vivid also in the location where I always lived and grew up.
So you surround yourself with so many disciplines, music being one of them. Requiem is an homage to a composer that's very close to you. Will you say something about him and the music, and then maybe that helps us segue into the work?
I think, first of all, that's again, and hopefully it's not boring, the usual borders, because of this solidarity system that was necessary in order to survive in the GDR. So the usual borders between different media, different art forms, between music and literature and visual art and so on, did not exist. Everybody helped everybody and noticed what the other person do and got inspired and so on. So I grew up in this kind of environment where theater and concert halls and music was equally important than museums. And therefore, friendships, I was used to have friends from all the other art forms. And then after the wall came down, I had another, like with the old sculptor, lucky incident that I met an Hungarian composer who was invited. He was to Berlin to have a fellowship in Berlin. He was at that time already over 60 and curious about this youngster, luckily. And then we became friends and formed an artistic and an normal friendship over many years and got inspired in both directions. I dedicated a lot of works to him, and he even also composed things for me, or inspired by works of mine.
Yes, I did want to point out that downstairs where your piece is, there is an opportunity to learn more about Kurtag's.
Yeah, Georgi Kotak, his name is Georgi Kotak.
So, and let's talk about angels in art history, which, whisper, demand, they're present, they've been present, ever since really, visual imagery was given to us as, a civilization. What is it about angels?
I think historically they were first in literature. That's kind of interesting. That is, there was first the written description of an angel, and then after that exists also in the verbal stories of all the religions. Then artists came, and that is, I think, this fascination continues until now. And with me, it's a very, very tempting task to give these creatures that only exist in words a physical presence in the world. And sculpture is a wonderful way of doing that, because in the end you have an object, and an object almost feels, for me, they are not objects. It's life. It has a soul. Yeah, when you do a piece of art, hopefully it has a soul. Yeah,
And this is a family of angels.
Yes, yes, and the piece that we installed here in the library, before that I did many single angels, and for Kotak, the composer that we mentioned, he never wrote a Requiem. He lost most of his family in the Holocaust, and but a lot of his music, in my understanding, carries the atmosphere of an Requiem. That's the reason why I wanted to make an Requiem for him, inspired by his work, and an odd angel family.
Well, and placed in a position in the library.
Yes.
And I know a lot of your work you cite yourself if it's commissioned, and some you're dealing with space that's kind of given to the piece. In this particular piece, in my experience of it is, you have that small angel, maybe a child, kind of leaning out, almost singing.
It's
to you.
almost like a family photo. Yeah, you make a family photo, and then there's the smallest child, and you put it in front, and it cannot hold still and goes towards the photographer, and that's the movement that is a little bit behind that. And for me, to place this piece and angels in general in the library makes very much sense, because I'm not coming from a religious background. I got inspired, or I got drawn into the theme of angel through literature, through philosophy. There's this famous thesis about history from Walter Benjamin, which is a wonderful piece of literature and philosophy, and that's the starting point of my whole thinking about angels.
Do you read a lot of theory? Is that part of your overall practice?
I have a theory. Walter Benjamin is a very, very good example for me. In my understanding, he was a philosopher, but all his writing is on the level of a real author.
Yes.
So I would claim that I prefer this kind of writing.
Yes, I understand. I understand. But he writes a lot about representation.
Yes, yeah.
And, obviously when you're giving form, as you're mentioning, to something that exists really without boundaries, an angel, you have to think about that representation. And your choice with representing an angel is using a mask-like form. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Now we enter in an area that I try to avoid, because it is close to interpretation, and I deeply believe that as a visual artist, you create a metaphor, and when the metaphor is wide enough, then you succeeded. And when I now start to give an interpretation, then I make the metaphor smaller, because I fix it to one or to a certain point. But that's important for me to avoid that, and that's the fascination why I love to make sculptures, because all the metaphors and all the different things are true at the same time. You create a sculpture, and depending on the angle from which you look at it, it can have totally different meanings, even almost opposite. It can be from one side very brutal, and from 20 centimeters around very soft.
Well, I think you see that in Requiem, and I really encourage everyone when they're looking at the piece to circle it. It's, you do get to see sometimes wings look like they're touching, and then you realize that they're not. The young angel, the small angel, and looks like they're leaning out, and in some ways they may even be sort of being pushed back.
Yes.
So there's so much dynamism in that piece, and you and I talked a little bit about scale.
Also, sorry that I interrupt
Yeah,
you. That is true for probably all the angels that I ever created. This text that I mentioned from Walter Benjamin describes the angel stuck between two forces, and that's an interesting way of seeing life and our being here on Earth in general. He describes in watercolor from Paul Klee, and that is also a painting of an angel, and this angel is stuck between the push from all the bad things that happened in the past, almost a pile of shit that is behind us, and a wind that blows from the paradise. And between these two forces, from the front and from the back, the angel needs to find its own movement. And that is what I try to capture in different ways in different sculptures.
I mean, I experience it seeing that, where just the way it's cited creates an atmosphere. There are elements, there's light, there's the open spaces, there's, the little caverns, and also the textural sense of these angels being carved. So I know they're cast. Do you want to talk a little bit about your process? Because we talked about it as more of a reductive process. You're not adding,
These
you are finding.
Two totally different talents. There are people that can create something out of nothing. They have a piece of clay and then they build. I would totally fail with that. I cannot do that. I need to have something where what I envision, I imagine it's already inside. So I need to remove until I can see what I already thought or imagined that is there. And then, especially with this piece, so there we have it, that is, was an installation in the Opera House in Madrid, in the Teatro Real. I do most of my sculptures in wood and then cast them in bronze in a way that the wooden texture is still very much present.
And they're very, some of them are very attenuated, like you almost feel they're so fragile.
Yes.
So how do you know when to stop?
That is, I had this experience, and that's quite interesting. I casted pieces that I did in wood, and quite large pieces. And wood is such a mysterious, wonderful material that the static of wood is almost not replaceable with a other material that is apparently, also in our understanding, much harder and much stronger. So, for instance, I made a bigger sculpture which is installed in the opera in Paris. It's 4 meters high and it's 2 people on their toes. So, and each sculpture weighs 400, 500 kilos. And in wood, it was absolutely no problem that these heavy wooden sculptures only rely on these toe tips and stand. When we casted that in bronze, we needed to insert a very complicated steel structure inside, otherwise they would fall apart. So,
and you always cast.
Yes, yes, yes.
And
I
these
like this
these
translation.
Are
I like this translation from one material and the other, and also when I work with fresh wood. So in the minute I finish a sculpture, it's absolutely necessary to cast it because the wooden sculpture would fall apart. It would get additional cracks and would not survive.
I see. So you don't think of those as maquettes.
No.
You don't work with maquettes.
No.
You're really going into the material
Yes.
itself. Well, I want to make sure we have time to talk about what lies ahead for you, what you're thinking about now in your practice.
I'm on the edge. I like to, all the things that are mentioned with public sculptures and so on, most of them were not originally commissioned. So it's more like this, the way how I work is I commission myself. I have an idea, I think something is necessary, and then I try to convince other people to think the same. And these journeys are sometimes very long. As for instance, there was a monument mentioned that I did in Paris for a rider, and the fight or the journey, let's call it that way, the journey from having the first idea to do that until the installation took 17 years. And that is always, it's challenging to even start these journeys. It's like you go into a mountain and then you see there the peak, the mountain peak from far away, but you need to estimate if you have enough stamina and energy and food in the backpack to survive the journey. So I'm telling the story because I'm coming to the point that when I first visited New York, and that is now 30 years ago, I had an impression of the city, which was, of course, very fascinated, like in comparison between the city and the jungle. And the jungle with two features, with a fascination for endless forms, for all kind of wonders, and very much alive day and night, and so on and so on. But at the same time also the danger that comes with it. Yeah, when you stand still in the jungle, you run the risk that the tiger jumps from the side and eats you. And these two things really stayed with me, and oddly somehow in my head are connected with a philosopher that I very much admire and read him in the same kind of direction, in the mixture of fascination and fear, and that's Nietzsche. So, and I have the odd idea that I want to do a bigger Nietzsche work here in this city, in the public space.
So literature is very important, and having your work in the library, I'm just curious how that feels to you.
Perfect. Just perfect, really.
Well, I think it'll, it feels wonderful to be involved for my own self in the visual arts here at New York Public Library. It's so essentially important because people aren't always just textual learners, they're visual learners. And I think being greeted both, at their beginning of their journey into the circulating library here and at the end of their journey by this family.
It's a big honor. I'm very happy with that.
Well, it's, I think it's very impactful in terms of how one looks and the invitation to keep looking, to keep coming back. So again, before we open this up, I wanted just to, ask you about, as someone who does travel and goes back and forth, what does it mean to have your work here in New York? And your Nietzsche idea, is that something that you're thinking about here in this city? Would it be in Germany? Do you have?
No, I think about that here in this city.
Here in New York, okay.
And that's and that's why I explained this long perception of mine, which haven't changed. Although now, that was my impression from the first visit on 30 years ago, and this impression continues. Although I'm coming here quite often, that continues to be my impression of the city.
Well, it'll be wonderful to see. It will be. So why don't we now open it up to questions from our audience for Alexandra?
There's a mic on that side to start. Anybody over there? This side?
In the sculpture, I noticed the younger angel has wings that are a lot wider, almost protecting the rest of the family, or a lot more free, like, looks like she's ready to fly, as opposed to the rest of the family.
Again, this is interpretation. Wonderful, fine. I cannot say anything. I can only embrace that.
You're here? Okay, I'm going to have to pass this down.
I'm so jealous that someone gave you access to their studio at such a young age. And I try to expose my grandkids to certain things that I've been exposed to. For instance, I took 2 semesters of sculpture at Columbia University. And now I'm cut off because the semesters are over and there's no more access. And I'm wondering what you think about, and I don't know how it is back where you are in Germany. I know there are maker spaces around the city. I wonder if you think that's a good idea to become part of that so you continue to have access so you can try out new things.
Absolutely. I think art education is absolutely substantial for us as human beings, because with all the, I'm fine that the people, also that I'm a big fan of mathematics and of physics and so on, and that we invent the thousandth version of an iPhone, but I think only in the arts we learn how we make a good use of these kind of inventions. And when we do not educate our kids, and that's not because all the kids should be artists, but there was an example in the district in Berlin where I grew up with this. Actually, that is what this sculptor, which let me in his studio, also at the sidekick, did all his life. He had, and that is quite fascinating, he did classes for kids once a week. Every class, actually, from every single school in this district came through this studio, and he always asked the kids the same task. He gave them a piece of clay and said, form an elephant. And that is one afternoon of a kid in his life, and I can tell you, really later on, I met by incident a lot of people that had the same experience. When you had this afternoon trying to make an elephant out of a piece of clay, that has an impact on your life, how you see things, how you discover how difficult it actually is, and what defines an elephant, and so on and so on and so on. So I'm very much for art education as much and as early as possible.
Oh, we have a mic coming for you.
You go next.
Thank you. You spoke of the sort of the unspoken collaboration between the artists, the music and literature and sculpting and painting before the wall came down. What happened after? Did it disappear? Was there this
Yes.
collaboration?
This kind of collaboration disappeared
Because there was more freedom.
Yes, there was the what I mentioned. One of the major reasons why the atmosphere in which this kind of collaboration could grow was the necessity of solidarity. And after the wall came down, we also merged into a society where more or less, or in many areas, or most of the time, individuals fighting for themselves. And that is then a different starting point to engage in a collaboration. You always look into collaboration most of the time, what can I benefit from it, instead of what can the thing benefit. So that, freedom, freedom to be an individual. And there's a big question to us today in our society, whether as much as we praise the value of freedom, we need to at least analyze these shadow sides. But it is a much longer conversation.
Very briefly, two-part. What type of wood do you use? And second,
Oak.
Okay. And is the process like Cire Perdue, is it a lost wax, or do you
Lost wax.
sacrifice the original to make the cast?
Yes.
Is my question. So that's gone.
Yes.
Okay.
And I do not refer actually to when I do my work in the studio, I already have very precise in mind there will be a cast, and it is somehow feels odd to refer, because the end result is the Bronx cast. So then is there the very interesting question, what is the original? Yeah, because I never exhibit woods because they are so fragile and they fall apart and so on. So my end result is the Bronx cast, and there's a very close relationship and collaboration with the Bronx caster, and I'm very much involved in this process, and I do the patination all myself, and so on and so on and so on.
And Alexander, I didn't ask you, do you do studies and sketches?
No. No, I do not do that because I have I'm very skeptical to make a thing in this size interesting is a total different task to make the same thing in life size interesting. And that's why these are all very individual challenges.
Yeah, over here.
Hi, that's wonderful presentation, thank you. There are a couple of things I wanted to say. I'm on the faculty at Columbia, and there are studios, so let's talk afterwards, okay? You come from a great tradition in Germany. I mean, I collect German expressionist things, woodcuts and sculpture.
Then you sorry that I interrupted you. Then you, for instance, for sure somebody who knows Ernst Barlach.
Yes, yes.
And that was another big source why I got interested in angels, because he did a very famous angel, and I saw that basically every year through my childhood.
Okay, and Barlach and people like that, right? So, do you, with this incredible tradition in the 20th century of German expressionism and modernism, did that play into your influence? I mean, the one artist you talk about, and there's a tradition of wood sculpture in Germany too. I mean,
yes, there is another thing, and that is maybe through the back door an influence that I today quite happy about it. That was a result of censorship and of less freedom. There's the expressionist tradition, and then there's the tradition in East Germany. And in East Germany, abstraction was not a really welcome thing. So most of the art was figurative. So whatever you did, you needed to start from the figure. And I'm in this tradition. And the figurative artist in East Germany referred to the expressionist. Yes, I'm absolutely in this line.
And have you seen the Neue Sachlichkeit exhibition at the Neue Gallery here? Do you know the Neue Gallery?
Yes, of course I know the
you
Neue Gallery.
There's
Yes,
an
yes.
interesting exhibition right now, Neue Sachlichkeit.
I haven't seen that yet.
You might find that interesting, your work. Anyway, thank you very much.
Since we're at the library, I feel compelled to mention a wonderful book by one of your East German compatriots, Jenny Erpenbeck.
Yes.
Kairos. That, just referring back to your comment a couple questions earlier about that struggle between freedom and collaboration and solidarity. Her book expresses that whole thing so beautifully.
She's a wonderful author. We grew up in the same district. We are same age.
I thought
This
maybe
is
you knew
wonderful.
her.
Yes.
She's fabulous.
We have time for one more question.
When you're working on a sculpture, how do you structure your day? Like, what does your routine look like?
It's almost an intimate question. Sculpture is tricky. I have a studio with natural light, with a big window, and sculpture is, oddly for me, for painting, I do not need natural light, which is surprising because, but painting I can do with artificial light. Sculpture I cannot do with artificial light. I need the light that really is around the sculpture. So I'm mostly there depending on daylight. So, which means I start my day quite early and work and have lunch and continue to work. Very simple. Yeah. So.
Well, thank you very much for having the conversation with me and being part of the conversation. I do want to ask you to stay. We have an additional treat from the LaGuardia Gospel Praise Team. So I'd like to welcome them back.
Guide me, O thou great Jehovah, pilgrim through this barren land. I am weak, but thou art mighty. Hold me with thy powerful hand. Guide me, O thou great Jehovah, pilgrim through this barren land. I am weak, but thou art mighty. Hold me with thy powerful hand. Bread of heaven, bread of heaven, feed me till I want no more. Bread of heaven, bread of heaven, feed me till I want no more. Strong deliver in the time of trouble. Will my soul and praises reign. Jehovah Jireh, my provider, will supply my every need. Bread of heaven, bread of heaven, feed me till I want no more. Bread of heaven, bread of heaven, feed me till I want no more. 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 Feed me till I want no more.